Welcome, this is David Carlins, and this is another one of my videos aimed at students of communication design, and in this case, people building a web page for a class project, for a portfolio, just a basic template that you might use in any class that you're taking or any situation you find yourself in where you want to present a number of different projects and do it from a home page and add a few things to that home page and do this yourself in HTML. So you're going to want to start with some kind of a sketch or drawing. It can be sophisticated. It can be created in a prototyping program like Adobe XD or Figma or Sketch or InVision, or it can be sketched out on a pencil and paper or anything in between. But you do need something to get started with, and you're going to want to go through the requirements or the objectives for your assignment. So for example, if the assignment says there has to be a title that identifies the class or the project and your name has to be on top, sketch all that stuff out so that you don't forget to do anything. So you're going to want to keep that handy, maybe tape it up on your wall if it's pencil and paper or whatever. The next thing that you'll want to do is to launch a code editor. But wait, before you do that, you're going to want to organize your files. I knew there was a reason I was going into Finder on a Mac or Explorer in Windows. And here we've got one folder that has the two files that we'll be creating. So I've kind of jumped ahead here, but you can see that these files are in a folder called class website. So we're going to need that folder because when you're coding, it's very important, especially everything I say is going to be followed up with, especially for people who are sort of student level coders, because once you become a professional, you make your own rules. And the challenges are different, but the practices that you learn to do as a student it's not like, oh, the real world's not really like that. It's just the real world's a little more complicated and different. And that's why we really emphasize problem solving skills and critical thinking is the most important thing in web design. So I've got a couple files here, but we're jumping ahead in time, like those Netflix movies that you can't tell whether or not they're like, wait, did the kids grow up? Anyway, we've jumped ahead in time a little bit here because we're going to end up with two files, index.html and style.css, but we're not there yet. So in your checklist, create a folder on your computer that you're going to dedicate to this project, and that's a general rule. So we'll keep this open, and then we're going to go back to our picture and identify three basic skills that we're going to need to make this happen. First of all, we're going to need to get code to create the basics of any web page. So that's number one. Number two, we're going to need code for defining links. And number three, we're going to need code for creating a style sheet. And there will be some other coding things too that I'll show you along the way. But the process will be that we'll identify the skills that we need, we'll search for them, or you'll search for them. I did the searching in advance just to save us a little time. But we're going to use how to make a website. We're going to use styling links. No, we'll do the how to add CSS. We'll use that resource at W3 Schools. And finally, we will look at how to style links. So let's start with how to make a website. And the essential code here in the head element is all essential except the style element. That we don't need because we're going to be using an external style sheet, which is really best practice for almost any website. It's hard to imagine. There are situations where that's not best practice, but I'll bet your teacher wants it. And again, in general, that's because that's the way it's usually done. But the essential elements here are the doc type definition in the first line, identifying a language in the second line. Both those things are, you can get away without them, but but why bother? It doesn't take that long to type them. They're short, actually. It doesn't take that long to copy and paste them. And then inside the head element, there's a title. You don't want the default untitled page to show up here in the tab bar in your browser. You want a coherent title to show up. So you'll create a title. You will define the meta tag for character sets, char set of UTF-8. Again, that's something you can, 99% of the time get away without, but somebody somewhere is going to come to your site from somewhere using some kind of browser, and that will be an important meta tag to make sure that they see all the characters in your site correctly. Finally, the viewport meta tag with these parameters is essential if you're going to be doing any kind of responsive design. Now, that's beyond the scope of what we're going to be doing. Our page isn't going to have a media queries. It's not going to have flex boxes. It's not going to have columns. So it's non-essential for us, but it's essential in general. So get in the habit of doing that. So that's all the content that's going to go into our head element. And then here we are. Now I've switched over to Visual Studio Code, Microsoft Visual Studio Code, which I not just recommend, but strongly recommend. And I'm going to open a folder that I put my files in, and here they are. Yours won't be there yet, so you'll be using File, New File. And I'm going to save this as a workspace. And I'll just call it a class project. And that just helps that just helps Visual Studio Code keep track of the files here. So let's start with the coding that I've adapted from W3 Schools. Obviously, they changed the title. The first two lines didn't change anything. Changed the title to something relevant. Didn't change anything on the char set or viewport meta tags. And instead of creating a style section in the head element, I linked to a file that will appear, style.css. We haven't created it yet, not here. And for that, I went to the how to add CSS and jumped down to the not inline, but where's the external? Here we go. And the only thing I adapted here is, my style seemed a little like, that's not very professional. So I just changed it to style. You can call it anything you want, but there has to be a .css file name extension. So that's the basic content. Now let's go back to our original how to make a website tutorial, and we can see that along with the head element, there's the body element. And the whole thing is inside HTML tags. So there has to be an open and close body tag. And how about that? I don't have one. So that's fantastic. We get an opportunity to create one. And what opens must close. So I'll go down to the end and close it. And I close tags in the order they were opened in. So the body tag opens after the HTML tag and it closes before it. So once we get into the body tag, I have a header section. Now the header is an HTML5 semantic markup tag. And maybe I should add a W3 Schools, plus this will give us a chance to search together. w3schools.com semantic HTML5 markup. And that should give us a list of all the different semantic markup elements, including main, header. You can kind of guess where that goes. We're not going to have a footer, but if we did, we'd use it. And so the tags that we'll be using from here are main, which is going to define the whole section of the page outside the header, and the header tag. And of course, those tags will open and close. So let's see how I did that. So here we have the main body of the website. And if we go back to our picture, that's the section that includes everything beyond the header. So here's the header section up to the white line, and then the body tag. No, it's all inside the body tag, sorry. But after the header tag closes, then we get to the main section. And by having two different sections, we can define different widths for the two sections. So the header section stretches the entire width of the page almost. If I was doing this a little more seriously, I'd tweak that. But it extends the whole width of the page, whereas the rest of the page, the main section, has a narrower defined width, makes the content a little easier to read. So the other HTML5 markup tag that I'm using is the section tag. And the section tag and the article tag are sometimes they're kind of interchangeable, and which comes first is a little ambiguous and used differently by different people. And if you only use one of them, you don't need to use the other one. So I've divided the main section of this site, that is the main section, into two different sections, and both of them open and close. The first one has the projects, the second one has additional content. So these sections open and close, and the first section has a ordered list, which means 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, as opposed to an unordered list, which is a bullet list. And each element there has an open link tag, a placeholder that will become a link to project 1 whenever that's created, and then a description of the project. So if we go back to our sketch, it's going to look kind of like this. These are links. This is a description to get filled in. The numbering happens automatically. So that's our first section, and then our second section we'll get to. But for now, let's just note that there's two different sections here, and let's focus on this section in a little bit of detail. So there's a heading in that section. Go back, a heading. Both sections have headings using the H1 tag, which is the top level heading. This is also an H1 tag, but why does it look different? We'll get to that. So this section is just links to the projects, and I think you can look at it. If there's anything that seems a little strange about the syntax, you can look that up at W3 Schools as well. And again, there is a second section. So, wow, that's really kind of it. That's all the basic HTML we need for what could be a kind of decent looking site. Now, if we go back to our options in Visual Studio Code, if we hadn't yet created a style file, we would just start typing and then save the file as style.css. Let's walk through what we've got going here. So I purposely made this grayscale because we're not focusing on design. Let me word wrap here. So the body tag is a background color. Doesn't have a font color, so it's going to have the default font color black unless something else is indicated for a tag. and the very, very basic font family style of sans serif. Then the header section, which is one of those HTML5 semantic markup tags that we looked at briefly at W3 Schools. Semantic markup meaning tags that where the meaning is in the tag. So guess what's in the header tag? The header. And text is centered there, so we knew we wanted centered text. Then comes the main section, and it's got a constrained width, 80% of the viewport, the usable section of the screen, a little bit of padding inside, and margin auto just means the same margin on the left and the right, which is another way of saying center this. Then when we have three styles, and the spacing is a little inappropriate, doesn't really wreck anything, but it's not right, separated by commas, then whatever style we define applies to all of them. So we've just defined a white color for headings 1, 2, and 3. Now you may be saying to yourself, hey, wait a minute, these headings aren't white, they're black. Well, you're right. So this style, where the tags are separated by a space, not a comma, means that this H1 style only applies to headers, to H1s inside the header. So that white color, black background, and other styling elements that you see up here, those are only applicable to H1 tags that are inside the header. Other H1 tags are not white, but the default color of black. The only styling that I've done with the links is to air them out a little bit with a top margin. By default, text links still come underlined, even though nobody underlines links anymore. So I turned off text decoration and I assigned them one color and then a different color when they are hovered over. I also defined the section heading 1 as black, even though black's the default color. I just wanted to back that up. And finally, I defined a style for every section, which is the thin white line on top and a bunch of spacing. So I could do a whole bunch more sections here, and this template would still work. Let's take a look now at how this file looks in an actual browser. So this is it. Let me refresh, see if anything's changed. Hover over the links and the underlining reappears because it's default. If you don't turn it off, it's on. And the last thing I'm just going to show you is how to embed content. So with iframes. Pretty much any content that you're looking for is available somewhere. If it's a video, if it's an audio, go to let me get back to my HTML and go to gotta change this back to wrap. If you go to YouTube and click on share, you can get an embed code and paste that in and you've embedded a video. I went and got I happened to be doing this tutorial a day after Charlie Watts, the drummer for the Rolling Stones for 50 years, died. And so I had put together a playlist of some of his jazz ensemble work. And then at Spotify, I clicked on share and got an embed code for that. And then we just make sure that we close all our tags, save everything, preview it in on our local computer. And once we're sure that we have it, and of course in real life, you're going to change your name, you're going to change the course in the semester, the tagline will be a little description of what you've done. But this is all basically ready to go. And should I share the HTML? We'll see. I'll keep an eye on comments and see if there's a demand for it. But I think this is basically what you need. And the emphasis here is on an approach to creating a page, problem solving, looking up the code that you need at W3 Schools. So hope you found this helpful, and I'll be looking to see your comments. Subscribe.